The most thrilling, spine-tingling series ever.
From the pages of R.L. Stein's best-selling books,
And the screams go on forever and ever.
We now return to Goosebumps.
Greetings, Goosebumps fans, young and old, big and small, living dead and undead. Welcome back to the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Isaiah Vargas, and I'm joined by my good buddies, Bjorn Palanick and Nick Shaw. We are the Goosebumps Crew, and we're back to talk some Goosebumps. If this is your first time joining us here on the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, once this year, we welcome you all. If you are or have ever been a fan of the popular series of children's books or the monster franchise that it spawned, then this podcast is going to be right up your alley. I guarantee it. Because as I always say, me, Bjorn, and Nick are some of the biggest Goosebumps nerds on the whole planet. And we could talk about Goosebumps for hours on end. And that's exactly what we do here on this podcast. So every week, we have a brand new episode talking about everything Goosebumps related, from the books, TV shows, movies, video games, merchandise, whatever it is. If it has Goosebumps in the name, we're going to talk about it until the oxygen has depleted from our lungs and we can't breathe and we fall on the floor. So, with all that said, if you end up liking today's episode, make sure you leave a like and comment. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell notification to get updates when new episodes go up every week. And, you know, maybe check out some of our other episodes while you're at it. If you want to get new episodes before they go up on YouTube, you can catch the audio-only versions a day early over on our audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. And you can follow the Goosebumps Crew over on social media, on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also follow Bjorn and Nick at Goosebumps, Saucy Fan, and Sean, respectively, on their social medias and their YouTubes. All of those links are in the description below, so check them out. Become a crew member today and join the Goosebumps Crew. We thank you in advance for your support. So this week on the podcast, we are doing another episode revisit. This time we are revisiting the very iconic episode, A Night in Terror Tower, the second big two-parter. I guess technically third two-parter, and actually fourth, because it was Haunted Mask, Camp Nightmare, Stay Out of the Basement, and Terror Tower. So this was the fourth two-parter. Mm-hmm. My mistake. Fourth two-parter of the Goosebumps 90s television series. This was directed by William Fruitt. It premiered on Fox in primetime on February 26, 1996, and was written by Dan Angel and Billy Brown. And it was based on the 27th book in the original series of the same name. And joining us today to talk about this episode is the actress who played the main character, Sue, in A Night in Terror Tower. We're very glad to have Mrs. Kathryn Short on the podcast with us today. Thank you for joining us, Kathryn.
Well, thank you so much for having me today, guys. It's a pleasure to go down this path today. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you. And we're going to be revisiting this very iconic episode of the Goosebumps 90s television series. But not only were you in this episode, but you were actually in two other episodes, two other two-parters, the Haunted Mask duology, the first and second one as Carly Beth's best friend, Sabrina. So you got to be in three episodes. I mean, if you count two-parters as two episodes, you got to be in 6 episodes. So you were in quite a bit of the Goosebumps 90s show.
I was, and it was special because I think for the first role that I got, which was Sabrina, there was a sequel to that. But then, because typically every book has a new cast, they ended up casting me specifically for A Night in Terror Tower. And so we knew that there might be a bit of backlash, just knowing that I was in 2 episodes, so people might string them together a little bit, but they went ahead with the decision and I got to be in my own episode, and yeah, here I am today. So yeah.
And you got to go from a supporting character to the main role, which is a pretty big step up in the world of acting.
It is.
Absolutely. So we're going to be delving into A Night in Terror Tower specifically today. We're going to save Haunted Mask for another future episode.
Another time.
We won't get into it right now, but just so you know, we're going to talk about it at another time. But we're going to be talking about Night in Terror Tower today, but before we get into the episode, let's get to know you a little more, Kathryn. So you, as we said, acted in the Goosebumps 90s television series, but recently you are actually, you do art for a career. Can you tell us a little bit about your current career?
Sure. So art is one aspect of what I do right now. I am also a creative director for a corporate business. I have a corporate job now as a corporate person in the world. And the art is really a side business that me and my husband do. And we really focus on large scale art, murals, abstract art, any of those things. So yeah, I split my time right now being a corporate employee and then also running a side business for myself.
That's really cool. And I mean,
I have seen some of the art on your socials and like it looks amazing. But I've also noticed here lately that you're doing some construction, seeing some demolition going on.
Yes, that is a whole other podcast. That is just a crazy, just completely taken on for ourselves. Yes, so we're at a stage right now where we have a massive hole in our backyard and we're going through the process. Let's just put it that way. It's a big feat.
Yep. And you can catch that discussion on the Construction Crew podcast.
Yeah. I mean, it's a chance you take, but we're headstrong going through it right now. So.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really cool. And I'm curious, like, is there a favorite? I know you said you do art as like a sort of a side job. But what's your favorite part about making art? And do you have like a favorite piece that you've done?
So that's a really good question. There's really a lot of angles that I can take when it comes to considering art because I am a graphic designer as well. So a lot of my art is tied both like physically and then also digitally. Like I was mentioning earlier, I'm a creative director for a corporation. So a lot of that work is on computer. And then I remove myself from that. And then I also do a lot of work that's just abstract, free form, crazy, throw paint around the room, make a mess. And then when I do that, I actually bring that art back into a digital perspective and I overlay into my computer and then I execute on that. So I really married the two processes together quite well. One from my graphic design background and then one from just an innate feeling that I need to have where I need to throw paint on a canvas.
Absolutely. And
you're thing about art is expression. That's why we love having like Tim Jacobus on, who did the original artwork for the Goosebumps books, amongst a bunch of others. And Craig White, who was the first one to actually do digital for Goosebumps covers.
Very cool.
So it's a neat talking about the different sides of not only just contemporary art, but actually like the digital side of it. They both gave great insight, but I think you're the first that's actually done both at the at the same time.
No,
so.
it's really cool. And yeah, I think like as I'm sure maybe some of the other actors that you guys have interviewed probably haven't stepped too far outside of an art industry to some degree, whether it's writing, art. I know like Kathryn Long is a dancer, like we're just always sort of in this network of people that are doing something under the art world. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this a little bit before the show, but as we said, you were in 3 different episodes of Goosebumps, but that's really all you did in terms of acting. Was it a personal decision that you wanted to do something besides acting? Was that decided upon long ago?
So that's a really good question. If we look at anybody that's trying to pursue an acting career, it is a tough industry, to be perfectly honest. It's not an easy thing. I think you need to have a constitution that's pretty strong to be able to go through with that in your life as a career. So for me, it came to a point where I ended up deciding that I was going to go into university. And at that point, I was also a singer.
Oh.
So I went into university to be a singer, and I went to the music program there. So I circling back on this whole idea of being an artist and everyone staying in these realms of an art industry. Like even there, I realized I didn't really want to be an actress or pursue that anymore. It wasn't really within me. I ended up going into university to do a bit of singing, and then I ended up pulling away from that and then going into a career as an art director now. So like I've kind of stayed in this realm of the arts, but I meandered a bit, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's totally understandable.
Yeah, I mean, it's always about discovering yourself growing up anyway. And, they also say that's what college is for as well, as discovering what you want to do going forward for the rest of your life. It's kind of the whole point of college, if you can go. And it's pretty incredible. Like some people know they want to do acting and it's in their bones. They go for it. Even when they're told no, it's like you said, you gotta have constitution to do that kind of.
Yeah.
But in your instance, I mean, obviously you did, very well in all those episodes. Kathryn Long, same thing. I definitely feel like if you guys pursued acting, you'd be on the Ryan Gosling level, in my opinion. It's probably biased, but still.
Oh my gosh, you're the nicest person.
Hey, we've spoken about doing the Haunted Mask 3. Like,
that's true. We did talk to Kathryn about
let's do it. The Haunted Mask 3. I mean,
bring it back.
Her husband had a great idea. I think it should be pursued. Just saying. But it's funny because you go to singing, but like Goosebumps has a musical, and we know some people. Just saying. You could be in the Goosebumps musical.
Nice. I went to university, yes, for singing.
Yeah.
But I mean that's totally understandable. And like you said, acting and the film industry as a whole is a very tough industry.
It is.
And some people just can't, just don't see themselves staying in that field of their life, and that's totally understandable. And we've talked to people who have, gone on to other avenues besides acting.
Yeah,
some of them left.
And honestly, I think at such a young age too. We were so young. Like I was, in my early teens. And so understanding the impact of this show, we had no clue. We didn't know that this was going to be impactful by any means. Understanding what you want to do in, 10, 15, 20 years from now, you have no idea what you're doing or where you're going. So, and when I look back on it now, I'm just like, wow, what a great opportunity that we had. This was such a wonderful thing that I got to experience. And would I change a few things along the way? Sure. Would I have felt a bit more confident along the way? Absolutely. But hindsight is 2020. So here I am as an adult.
We take the paths in life, and as long as that path leads to somewhere good, then, you did the right thing. So absolutely.
Exactly.
And to be honest, even if your acting career was that short, no pun intended, there was
oh, you're funny.
There is a really great impact that had going forward. As we discussed prior to filming tonight, is looking at people like not just myself who grew up on the show, but people like Isaiah who found it later, and Bjorn, who was just a baby Bjorn at the time. And
a little delayed,
sticking with it. And
the Goosebumps hype.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the great thing about it. Like we've had like Kai Eric Erickson on and a couple others, and they say they get stuff for Goosebumps, and they're still acting, but they get stuff for Goosebumps more than they do anything else, as far as like fan mail or when they actually do go to a convention. Rarely as an appearance or whatever, but Ryan Gosling lately had something like that. So I mean, it's just
did his movie Fall Guy, and somebody approached him with a Say Cheese and Die poster, and he signed it, and he was like, "Oh, I remember being on that." So it's
totally insane, because for me, from my perspective, I'm just a middle-aged 40-year-old woman, like living my life. So I've had messages from people that are interested in the Goosebumps thing, and I'm just like, oh, really? Like I've removed myself completely from this world, but I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that someone's interested in talking to me. So like that in itself is such a crazy idea. And it's already been so lovely to talk to you guys because it's really resurrected a lot of like cool memories and things that I have like totally forgotten about in the past.
Absolutely, and we're glad to talk about it. It's always we mentioned this
100%.
again, but we were talking about before the show, but we mentioned this, and it was, you know, I mean, you never know when something you do is going to have a major impact, and Goosebumps had a big impact in its time. Like maybe it didn't seem like it back then, but certainly now, all these years later, it certainly did, and it continues to be brought down to future generations, so it's going to live on forever and ever and ever. And I can imagine that'd be a really crazy thing to process.
Honestly, guys, so I had a Scholastic book or a little like catalog that my 5-year-old brought home from school, and I'm going through the catalog, and it's like this little catalog of like books that he can buy. And of course, it's October, so it's like, bam, right in the middle is like Goosebumps books. But I think they like have like younger audience books for like younger kids. Mm-hmm. And so for the first time today, before we got on the call, I was like watching my show, and I had my kid there, and I was just like, "You want to see something funny? Mom's on a show." And so I let him watch like a little bit of it, and he was so confused though because he was just like. Didn't understand that the character wasn't me and that I wasn't the character, and he just didn't understand the whole concept of it. But it was really cool to be able to share that with my child today too, and also be able to point out those books in the Scholastic catalog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just get to be like, I know about those. Like I got to be on that show. Like,
I love hearing that. That's beautiful. Honestly, I love hearing that when like, you know, you get to show your kids, you know, the Goosebumps show. Like, you know, one day if I ever, you know, have kids, I'll be doing the same, you know, like as soon as what is it? Age 7 is the age.
7Y, I think is, 7Y is the,
straight away, they're going to be watching Goosebumps, reading Goosebumps. Like, that's it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm broke because of Goosebumps. That's where all my money goes, you know? So, like, I mean, as long as I get to enjoy it.
Not monetarily rich, you're Goosebumps rich, as we say.
You're emotional.
That's right.
I did say that. You know, a lot of people say to me, you're rich. You're just in Goosebumps, you know, like that's where you're...
Goosebumps currency.
Monetary value.
Goosebumps currency.
Yeah.
We always
because I did the same thing with my daughter. Like I raced her on Goosebumps, and our first night outside movie will probably be a Haunted Mask or some, you know, Goosebumps episode, I'm sure. Usually just because that's kind of a tradition at this point. But it's funny to see that because now she's 15 and still trying to instill that like to her going forward. Her passion quite isn't there as mine is for Goosebumps. Her whole room isn't going to be decorated like my, you know, living room is back here, but it's okay. You know, I'll let it go.
I know we're digressing from the questions, but I do have to continue down on this path of children because my kid is also very obsessed with Halloween. So I would love to like understand, do any of you guys have the 12-foot skeleton?
12-foot skeleton, no, but
you know, like gigantic Costco.
But yeah, I don't, but I have quite a bit of other stuff. Like I just didn't have room for a 12-foot because I actually live out in the country, so I'm like, I know it'd just be for me, but like, kind of want the 12-foot line. I don't know if I want to dive into that yet.
Well, front yard, out the front. That's what you're going to have to put it on the roof or something.
One of my Halloween decorations that'll be on my backdrop for our Halloween season, this little light up ghost holding a pumpkin, and it's all tie-dyed and it changes color. I like it. But Halloween, whenever the Halloween decorations come out, like you're in for vibes.
Yep.
I was in Target today, and I saw like the Halloween candies and the costumes out and the decorations, even like the Halloween like cereal. Like I saw like Halloween Captain Crunch out, and I'm like, it's time.
Are you guys all from the States, or are you from Canada?
Me and Nick are from the States. Bjorn is actually in Australia.
Oh, yes, from the accent.
Yeah.
Biggest Goosebumps fan collector in the land.
Yep. We tell him that he should.
Where in
I don't think
Australia?
it's a far stretch to say the world.
I live in the Gold Coast, actually, so where Margot Robbie's from. Yeah. Can't say I've ever seen her, but I have seen Mr. Chris Hemsworth once when I was in Byron Bay. So
I've been up the Gold Coast. I started in Cairns and I went down to Sydney and then I went back up. So I've been to Surfers Paradise. I've been to Newcastle. I've been to, where did I stop along the way? Byron Bay.
Oh,
it was very beautiful there.
Oh, it's so nice here. Like, honestly, the only thing that we have that really sucks is everything wants to kill you here.
Jellyfish.
Spiders the size of your hand.
Yeah, snakes. Oh my God. And you can't go swimming up north anywhere. You can't even go swimming in the beach up north because chances are
we went to Fraser Island, which was unbelievable. And this was quite a while ago. And the sand dunes obviously are breathtaking, but the beaches are completely filled with like massive jellyfish. And we were in like 4x4s driving down the beach and they were just like littered everywhere. It was insane.
Jellyfish things are not
actually on the beach.
Yeah,
like
washed up. Yeah.
Oof.
Oh wow,
that's even scarier.
You can't step on them. Like,
I don't know. I just thought you saw them off from the beach, looking out in the water, not actually on the beach.
You got the dingoes at Fraser Island too. Wow. Like, there's dingoes like running around. Like, because I stayed there when I was a kid a few times, and we were sleeping. It was probably like, I don't know, 1 a.m, and we could just hear scratching at the door. And we're like, what is that? And we kind of looked out the window and there was dingoes like trying to like get in. And like, oh my God.
Was there
this is terrifying. Yeah. But that's awesome to hear that you visited Land Down Under. And you've been to pretty much all the hot spots too. I mean, Surfers Paradise, that's like the main sort of attraction here on the Gold Coast. So
I did that. I was there for a few days. I was traveling alone and I think I was pretty in and out at that point. I was like, been there for 2 days and then I left. But either way, I was in Australia for well over, I'd say like 8 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, good long time.
The place I'd like to visit.
That's awesome.
I hear a lot of good things about Australia as a whole, but there's certainly the hot spots there that you guys were talking about. I'd like to visit one day.
Did you surf or scuba dive while you were there?
Well, I do have a story about the surfing. So, of course, when you go, you're just like, I got to try the surfing. I got to do it. So I did the whole quintessential traveler's mistake of buying a surfboard at the beginning of my travels. Got it for cheap. I think I stood up on it once. It was a short-nosed surfboard, so it was really quick. It wasn't like a long one. Out of my mind. Bought this thing, and then I had to go from place to place. So I had to not only lug like my backpack and all my shit with me, but I had this massive surfboard that I had to like get on the bus with and go from town to town thinking that I was going to be like this amazing surfer. And I think I ended up getting 2 Surfers Paradise. And I was like, I'm done. Where do I sell this thing? I am clearly not going to be a surfer. My surfing career has ended here.
It ended as fast as it's begun.
Exactly. Immediately.
You telling me that story is like, it's hilarious because so many like people I know have done the exact same. Even just one of my cousins from Sweden, he bought a surfboard like pretty much the day he arrived. He's like, oh, I heard about the surfing. I have to get a surfboard. So like he was lugging it around everywhere. I mean, he stayed with us for quite a bit while he was here. But then obviously, when he did start traveling around, he didn't realize that he had to take
the thing with surfing too is that really like the ocean has a whole other agenda. You're so hard to get out there and it's like, nope, you're going to start over. So your whole energy is just basically trying to get past the break. And then once you do, you're just spat back out. So it's difficult.
The ocean's scary.
Oh, yes.
You made it look so easy.
Speaking of scary.
How he did it. Movie magic, I guess.
I do want to get into talking about
Yes.
Goosebumps again. So before we get into the episode, I'm curious to know, because we always ask, the people that have acted in the TV show, and sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't. Were you familiar with the book series before you came onto the show, or were they kind of like unknown to you?
Yeah, so I definitely had some from a cultural perspective. Like I knew everybody was reading the books. I think I maybe had read one or two of them, but like it wasn't like I came into this scenario fully understanding the breadth of the written books. I think R.L. Stein did he not do another series outside of Goosebumps as well?
He did before
He
Goosebumps,
had Fear
he did
Street,
Fear Street.
which was for more like teenage.
Older.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have older siblings, so I think maybe I connected the dots there, but didn't necessarily I didn't know the full, book series that I was walking into. But I was aware of it. I just obviously hadn't sat down and read them all.
Mm-hmm. Did it seem like it was popular with like some of your classmates, or was it like kind of the same deal?
I think so. Like from a literature perspective, I think people were into the books, but I think once they started to visualize them into movies and beyond, it became much bigger. But from the beginning, it was sort of like, I don't know if you guys would remember this at all, but like the Babysitter Club books, like there was like, there was like a bunch of, or Christopher Pike books that existed back then, where there were like a big series of books that existed. And I think maybe even times were simpler back then too, right? Kids didn't just sit down and watch as many online movies or shows, whatever. So books were the outlet.
Absolutely. Well, and we always talk about like how, because by the time this show came out in 95, the books were about 3 years old. So like they were still kind of formative. They're still trying to catch their footing. We actually always say that the TV show is what like really rocketed the popularity, because now it was a lot more mainstream, and you had the like you said, the visuals to go along with it. So maybe those kids who were like, I don't want to read, were able to get familiar with that series a little more. But it's always interesting because there's been some people who say like, I never heard of these books before I did the show. Like this was, to me, like they would be like, to me, this was just another show. Like I had no idea. But there's some people who were like, yeah, I totally knew the books. And in fact, actually, Kathryn Long, I think, said that she was like a big fan of the books, and she really liked The Haunted Mask. So, and then she ended up playing the main character.
She actually kind of geeked out talking to Stein. Which, did you get to meet him? I'm assuming just because. Every two-parter you did was a special, and he always did the intros for the specials.
That's right, and he always wore just black.
Yes,
that's all he wears is black. A man of few words, like he's a bit aloof and he keeps to himself, and he has his allure to him. But yes, he came onto that one shooting date and did his line delivery, and I got to meet him, and it was really cool. And I was like, hey, nice to meet you. But it was a pretty quick interaction, so I don't really have tons of things to say about my memory of him.
Oh, he was a busy man back then, always pumping out a new Goosebump book every month, was it, Nick?
Exactly.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I think he said the processing time from writing to where it actually hit the shelves was only like 6 to 8 months. It's less than a year for every book. So
this is why
write two or three a month. So you got to figure, they just kept coming, which was wild. I mean, I always thought it was funny that Long called him the
creepy Mr. Rogers.
The creepy Mr. Rogers, which is kind of accurate.
Yeah. Hi, I'm
because Isaiah and I got to meet him.
Goosebumps books.
Yep, right. His intros were all the same, kind of like, hey neighbor.
Well, I want to get
Rogers,
we got to meet him last October, and I as soon as she said that, I was like, yeah, no, I totally see this. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So he went to Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's actually near where Isaiah lives, but I live in central Indiana. So it took me about 7 hours to get there, I think, roughly on one way.
Okay.
Totally worth the trip, though. Just because I got to meet Isaiah in person. Actually, I think that's the first time we actually talked or met at all. But it was amazing to see the love that Goosebumps actually still has. There were thousands of people. They were turning people away from his first appearance at a library to where they actually had another appearance later on at a high school nearby that he was going to be at. And even that they had to start turning people away from.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
it's amazing that, and it's not just adults. I mean, there were a lot of kids still into Goosebumps because obviously he's still writing. I mean, he just turned 80 last October.
Really?
But he's still writing books.
Yeah. New Goosebumps books are still coming out. In fact, one just came out just about 2 weeks ago.
Last week or the week before. Yeah.
Getting all sorts of different variety of things. Like we even just got a coloring book for Goosebumps, like an official, like there's all sorts of, I don't know, we're living in a good time for Goosebumps at the moment. Like we're getting so much awesome stuff. Like we're getting obviously the new books.
That nostalgia, man. Nostalgia is
coloring books. Nostalgia. We're getting lounge fly bags. We're getting figurines. We're getting we're living in a very good sort of spot. Like
I love it.
A little bit of a resurgence.
But it's not. I'm not surprised at all that he just came on and just spoke his lines and didn't do anything else. He seems like a man with a very dry sense of humor. Like he'll just come on, do what he has to do, and that's it.
Yeah.
But I'm very glad you got to meet him. You'd probably be definitely more likely to meet him when he comes on the episode. But it's always interesting. I know Kathryn Long definitely said that she was like super, super stoked when she got to meet him. So it's always interesting. So
that actually leads into a Night in Terror Tower question because we've talked about it on here before, but actually that is the only episode that ever got kind of like a behind the scenes look at the episode. Like there was never any featurettes or anything else for any other episode.
Really?
But that one got one on the VHS tapes that you could take a sneak peek at A Night in Terror Tower.
Right. And I think they did like a montage / compilation of us working behind the set, right?
Yep.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
They did a few interviews with like Deborah Forte, and I think Corey Sevier was the one who was like walking the people behind the scenes about stuff.
The reason why I'm not remembering this so much is because I ended up getting the flu when I was working on the set. And that was the day that had happened. So I think while he was taking people around, I remember this very specifically being like, oh, I need to be there for this one particular thing. And I ended up coming down with the flu for 2 days while shooting. So that was specifically landing on that time that happened, where they were filming a lot of like the B-roll for that. Corey was just such a confident young actor at that time too. I remember just working with him. He was just like, you couldn't say anything to him that would bring his spirits down. He was such a lovely, wonderful human being to work with. He just had so much joy and he was so tenacious. And I just remember so many wonderful things about working with him.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. It's amazing. Like everyone we've talked to, not one single person has had a bad thing about their time on Goosebumps. Like they loved the people they worked with. They loved everything about the process, even if it was completely hectic at times or what have you. Everybody was just like super cheerful. Everybody we've had on has had nothing but good things, and it's rare because there's still a few that are still in the business. But Alan Doucette was one of the prop guys on the show, and he was telling us about that. And he was like, I don't think I've ever worked on another project where that's actually happened, where I was on that. I could have done that forever. He's like, it was just,
honestly,
so much of a pleasure.
Really, really, really cool experience. And like, I can even just say like some of the filming environments weren't always as savory as you would like them to be. For example, working on A Night in Terror Tower, we filmed in the middle of February in Canada. So it is cold, cold, cold. And like any scene that you will see us running around in, for that day, we had entire like wetsuits on underneath our outfits just to keep us warm, because it would be like minus 30, whatever. Obviously, like in between scenes, they would pull us into the trailers and we would get warmed up. But they couldn't even give us anything warm to drink, because if you drink hot chocolate or you drink anything warm, you go back onto set and you have like your breath showing on film. So, you know, there was definitely things that you learn as a young adult in the adult world when you're working on a set with everybody else, that you're like, okay, like you just have to pivot, or you have to problem solve, or you have to do this. So, you know, it was a beautiful experience. There were some challenges along the way for sure, but it was wonderful in total. Like, I have nothing bad to say about my experience there.
I actually wanted to ask what, because as we mentioned, you know, we did Night in Terror Tower, but you did the first Haunted Mask. That was not only your first appearance on the show, but that was the first episode. What was the audition process like weird, or was it just like pretty simple, walk in and get the part?
So the audition process was amazing. However, I will say that there was a meet cute moment. That was, they had already cast Kathryn Long, who has the exact same spelling of Kathryn as I do. So it was like perfect. They had already cast Kathryn Long. I walk in there, I do my audition or whatever, and they look and they're just like, you gotta be kidding me. Kathryn Long and Kathryn Short. And they're just like, well, that's the long and short of it. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe did I get the role based on the fact that my name is very similar and I'm the opposite? I don't know. Or maybe they just, we'll never know the answer.
It'd be really funny if that was the reason. It was just because you had opposite names. Just be like, wouldn't that be funny?
They probably just thought,
well,
like,
now
wow,
that
this
the
is
worm
amazing.
thing has been answered, we're going to have to now find out this answer.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
Were you nervous being in the episodes for the first time? Like, was that kind of like a nervous experience?
It was, but I already had like a bit of acting experience prior to that. So I had done obviously a handful of commercials prior to that. This really was, though, my first experience in an episode or like a talking role in a series. So, of course, I was super nervous. Who wouldn't be nervous, right? It's a big day. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, in many instances in your life, you take what you have in front of you and you just do what you need to do to survive. Sometimes you even look back and go, how did I do that? Like, sometimes I look back at my acting career and think, I don't know if I could ever do that again. But when you're in it, you just do it. You put one foot in front of the other, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Now,
one of the things that like it was kind of not just Kathryn, but another Eugene Lipinski. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not, but he was in an episode called Girl Who Cried Monster. But he says he walks down the street still and gets recognized. He's like, "Oh, weren't you Mr. Mortman in Goosebumps?" And he's proudly like, "Yes." He even had me send him a Goosebumps hat so he could wear. So I was like, "Yeah, no, that's not a problem. We'll send you a hat, buddy." But Kathryn's experience was a little different. So now I'm kind of curious. After the episode aired, and it was a huge success. I mean, did you kind of have the same issue she did as far as like going out in public, or was it a little easier?
I think there was like a few times that I had a few people come up to me. One in particular, I was at a movie like rental place, Rogers Video or whatever, and I was there looking in. I'm like, oh my God, there's my thing. And somebody recognized me and asked for an autograph, and I was just sort of like, oh, they recognize who I am. In general, no, nobody would know me from a hole in the floor, but back then, I would say like there were a few instances where people would want my autograph, and it was really lovely, and it was nice, and it was humbling. But as far as like anything today, no, nobody would know.
Are you like cool among your classmates?
Well, there's at least 3 people here who would know. So,
I mean, of course.
Were you like cool among like your classmates because you got to be on a TV show?
Yes and no. If you want my honest answer, I would say yes. There are some people that were like, wow, really proud of you. This is really cool. It's really awesome. And then, of course, like being a teenager in high school, you're going to get a bit of people that are just like, if you want an honest answer, yeah, it wasn't completely seamless. Let's put it that way.
Understood.
You're getting two sides of it. You're getting like, oh wow, you're in Goosebumps, and then you're in Goosebumps.
Totally,
like,
totally.
And then you had the third side, which was like, what's that?
Oh man.
Well, I want to ask because you mentioned the sets. So you had this episode, Terror Tower, had some really cool sets. One of them, as we found out, was the castle scenes for Terror Tower itself were filmed at Casa Loma in Toronto. What was it like getting to film there? Was it like a really cool place to film? Did they rent out the entire place? Do you know?
Well, they must have. So if you know anything about the history of this place, it's a castle that is built in the middle of the city of Toronto by a guy named Henry Lott. And I believe he built the castle in like the early 1900s. He had a bunch of success, built this castle, and then later in his life, unfortunately, lost a lot of money and ended up having to sell the castle to the city. And so now it resides as like an area that people can go and visit. But the castle itself is absolutely stunning. And one of the most memorable things for me being able to be a part of this is to be able to see all the backdrop of this. So anyone can go and visit Casa Loma, but when you're in there, I got to see all the crevices. I got to see all the secret rooms, all of the secret hallways. You know, it was a very cool experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's
awesome.
I've said that Night in Terror Tower probably has like the coolest locations in a Goosebumps episode because you have this big castle, like, and they really did a good job making it look medieval, even like in like the museum scenes where it's like you know, the wax figures and stuff like that. It looks something out of the medieval times.
Exactly.
But when
and one of the things I was going to say is we didn't really have a ton of like studio time. So most of the filming was at Casa Loma. I think maybe there were a few days post-production that we'd have to go in and like do voiceovers or maybe reshoot something. But most of everything was on the one set in the same location. So that was really cool because we got to be in that one spot.
Mm-hmm. And especially when they like when Sue and Eddie go back in time to the medieval times and everything's lit up with torches and you have all like the prisoners like behind the gate.
All there.
Oh, it's such a great set. And they really made it look just amazing for that particular, story.
Yeah. And I was going to say too, like considering the fact that the whole thing was just filmed in this one location, like even the street views and everything were all in this one vantage point. Like they brought in old like double decker buses. They brought in like old vintage cars, like historical cars from that time. So it was really cool. And I was even thinking about like the costumes that we got to wear, at the very end of the episode where it was like we got to wear like all of these heavy like period piece outfits, and that was just something I think a little special about that one particular episode.
Mm-hmm. It was a very visually good episode. I guess
Goosebumps didn't have a lot of period pieces, so especially from the episode standpoint. I mean, there was really only one other that went back in time, but it never went that far back in time.
It
to
wasn't
where
like
it
a
was
different
drastically
period in
changed.
time. It was just kind of like
Yeah, it was not a different period. It was
And also a
if it were
different
like
country.
19, like
Mhm.
maybe 80s.
I had to bring out
So,
my
yeah.
English accent, everybody.
Well, I actually have a question about that, but really quick, I want to ask, and I probably know the answer to this one already. I don't suppose any of the filming was actually done in England, was it?
Absolutely not. It was not done in England. It was absolutely done in Toronto, Ontario. I don't even think that's the right accent. I think that's a Cockney accent.
Oh, Cockney, British accent.
It's close enough. It's enough.
So like
Yeah.
because I know they had some shots of like, you know, like downtown sort of area in England and the UK, though I'm pretty sure that was probably like stock footage.
It was.
But there's also like the big hotel. Was that a big set, or was that also like was that an actual
All in the castle. It was
that
all
was
in the castle.
castle too?
The castle is
Really?
so big. The castle, I was doing a tiny bit of research because I'm like, I should probably know a bit more about this castle. And from what I thought I read, it was like 98 rooms are in this castle. It's a big castle. So they were able to break it apart essentially to be able to use it in different scenes.
That is incredible.
Wow.
I didn't even know that was
Yeah.
like, because that looks
Like
it
the
looks like a-
kitchen, all of that. That was all
Yeah,
in the...
that's all in the castle.
Wow.
So there's
Oh,
a
wow.
scene there's a scene where we're running down a hallway, and
Yeah.
then I end up coming out into this other like area where now I'm in the medieval times, right? Do you remember that
Yeah.
part where I like run down the tunnel and I'm out? So there's actually an actual underground tunnel at Castle Loma that's connected under Spadina Street, and it is connected to what they call the castle stables. And so there's another like mini castle across the street that was considered the stables. So we shot there for a while too. It's just a really cool space. So there was a ton of like vantage points that they could get. And going back to that tunnel that I was running down, it was actually quite interesting because they made the scene feel like it was really long. So I'd be running down the hall, and then they'd stop, and then they'd flip the camera, and then I'd be running down the same hall, but from the other way, and then they'd stop and flip the camera. And so it seemed like I was running down a really long hallway, but really it was just one hallway. They just kept flipping the camera back and forth. So yeah, they got tons of them than they really are, or appear very big and grandiose than they are.
That's so awesome. So I'm gonna see this in a completely different light now when I watch the episode. Like this is
Guys,
all one place.
I was in a sewage manhole too. Don't you remember that? When I popped
Yeah, I
my head
remember
out
that.
through the
Yeah, and then the
Yeah.
bus came and you were
Yeah.
like, oh no.
yeah.
I can't believe
They
that.
actually put me in the sewage manhole. Me and Corey. It was great. We went down into the underbelly of Toronto.
That is incredible.
I don't think I've ever
cannot-
heard anybody ever call going into a sewer. It was great.
Yeah, it was great.
It was
Wouldn't
worth
trade it
it
for the world.
guys. It was worth it.
Yep. Hey, the sacrifices you make for acting.
Probably warm in there.
Oh,
Sorry, plus.
Indeed.
I can't believe that it was all one location. I seriously
Yeah.
thought that was like, if not like an actual hotel, at least a set or like a studio. But wow, that's part of the castle too. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So they really-
the eating scene, everything. It was all there.
Wow.
Oh, your favorite scene where she's eating the scone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
I've mentioned before that the scene where the one woman is eating the scone and it's like very like, and then gets like a little bit on it, like on her face, and then like,
Yeah, exactly. You know what? There's a couple leading up scenes to that are really good too. With the it's the front desk clerk, and he's there being, you don't know your last name, and they do this one shot where they put the camera super close to his face, and he's like, well, once you find out, let us know. And that whole scene was just brilliant. So like that's one of my favorite.
yeah, they
Parts
did a lot of
to the
that where
episode.
like the really like
Love it.
close up on someone's face with almost like it's almost kind of like the
Yeah.
fisheye lens, so it's like the proportions
Yes.
are very exaggerated.
Exactly.
And then you also have like, because Sue is like sort of like envisioning the medieval times when they're in the restaurant. So like there's one diner who's like eating, but then she like sees it as almost like a barbaric sort of eating. So like
Yes.
eating like a chicken leg.
That's when everything starts to fall apart in the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right?
like
We don't know who we are. We don't remember our last names. What's happening? Everything's
With
falling
walls
apart.
come down.
So,
yeah. I gotta say,
that's right.
I mean, we already brought up Corey, but I just gotta say, like, number one, he was pretty good. Like I don't know how old he was at the time, but like for his age, he was really good at like seeming panicked.
I guess maybe 9.
Yeah, I was going to say around 9, he was probably like early double digits. So he might have been like maybe 10, 11, 9 around that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But like, especially in that scene where like they're realizing that like, and he's just like, where do we live? Like, do we live in a house? Like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
Like,
you know what? And he took his jobs, he took every day so seriously. For somebody that young to be that attuned to everything, he was really honestly very precocious, very smart, very involved. Like he took everything very seriously. He was awesome to work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was great, and you two really like worked off each other. And I think it was said on set that people were saying like not only do you look alike, but like you would probably pass guys on the street and think you were actually like brother and sister.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like,
for sure. And I think that's probably in part why the casting was sort of like, although she's been in an episode before, they just look so perfect for each other. Like, we have to do this.
mm-hmm.
So I think there was a bit of a aha moment at that point, right? When they saw us together.
Your chemistry was just so on point. Like you said, you really did seem like you were brother and sister.
Mm-hmm.
It was just...
Yeah, you guys had like just really good, like you just bounce off each other really well. Like when you're bickering in the lobby and just like, where's my camera? He's like the mad pick strikes again.
Yeah.
The telltale like
restaurant, like
eye rolling, brother, sister. Yeah, for sure.
Hands the West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such an amazing episode. It's one of my favorites. And just the scene where you two are in the restaurant and you're trying to like talk about, do we live in a house, like Isaiah was saying, that scene.
Yeah.
That is just one of the greatest. I think that's one of the greatest scenes in the entire Goosebumps show because it's just so real. The way you bounce off each other. It's like, man, like, I couldn't imagine.
Intense. It was an intense scene to film because I remember just a massive slot of lines that we needed to know and memorize together with a very high intense emotional string to it. So I do remember that one in particular being a very difficult thing to film just because it was like a very high intense dialogue between the two of us that lasted for quite a while too, right? Like we had to carry that dialogue for a long period of time. Without much else, right? There wasn't really a ton of things going on around us. So we had to really like dig deep to keep energy high and to make people feel scared and anxious.
It's a very real scenario.
Which I think is the hard part about acting because it's one of those things like it's never just like, well, I mean, I'm sure it can be, but it's rare that it's like one take too. So like by the time you get your panic attack, basically like
it's your 7th or 8th panic attack.
All right, well, reset. Let's do it again. Okay, well, here's your 8th, 9th, 10th panic attack. Yeah, so it's never just one, it seems. So it's really taxing, I would think, to keep that emotional.
Well, not just emotional, but probably physical too, because I'm sure you guys had to run a lot in this episode.
Yeah, definitely. We were running all over the place. Up the stairs, down the stairs, across everywhere. Like it was quite a bit. And like, I think now when I look back at it as an adult where I'm looking at this, I'm like, would I have done this differently? Probably. Would I have moved my arms a little bit more? Probably. Would I have, from an outside perspective as an adult looking at this now, it's just a different perspective in general. But when you're going through it, I think can be very challenging, right? Like especially at that age, you're not really 100% certain like who to turn to ask for advice. Like you're just very new. You haven't been exposed to a ton of this in the industry in general, right? So like anything in life.
One question I had was the scene where you're running down the actual staircase. How narrow was that staircase? Because you're like when you're being chased by the executioner, like it looks so narrow, like you can barely like fit.
Yeah, so the spiral staircase, it exists still there. That's an actual, like, it was not part of the set that lives in Casa Loma, and it's very narrow. It definitely would not be approved by any home to date. Staircase would not be approved,
especially not to run on.
Yeah.
No. Right. Oh. That always gave me anxiety, that scene where the camera would like pan down the staircase and just going like around. That moment always gave me like anxiety, especially because when you see the shadow of just the execution like along the back wall, like, oh man, like, it's really intense. That
I guess it did its job, because if it's giving you anxiety, then you were scared.
It does, that one scene for some reason.
What was it like getting to work with the actor who played the executioner? Because you have this guy who's chasing you around the whole episode. Was he like a nice guy off the cameras?
He was the biggest teddy bear and so nice. And then when the cameras were rolling, he'd be like, "Roar!" But he was like the nice. You can't escape me. But he was like the nicest guy.
Oh wow! It's
and he'd have to like grab us and stuff, and like he was super sweet.
Was he like when the cameras would stop? Would he be like, "Are you fine? Like you're not like shaking?"
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like it was.
Oh my god!
All jokes and giggles behind when things would be turned off. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the with Bill Skarsgård, like when they did the scene in the house, and he like grabs Eddie and he's like drooling on him. He's like, tasty, tasty. As soon as they would hit cut, he's like, "Oh, you okay? Like, I'm so sorry." He's like, "This is after I've been drooling on him."
And then the actor for Eddie, this little boy, he's like, because he's like, "Yeah, are you all right? Like, are you okay?" He's like, "I love what you're doing. Keep at it."
Hey, his name was Eddie.
yeah, he was like, I love what you're doing with the character. Like, keep going with that. This little boy.
It always seems to be like the people who they cast in monster or killer roles, or as it were, and a lot of things, always seem to be like some of the nicest people. And that's the crazy part. Like, I go to a lot of conventions throughout the year, mostly the horror conventions, and all the ones I meet all are just like some of the nicest people you'll ever talk to. And it's so funny to think on screen you're this terrifying figure that may have chased or killed so and so, but yeah, exactly. It's just they're teddy bears, and it's the craziest thing.
In Australia, we got John Jarrett, obviously in Australia, who's Wolf Creek, and he goes to every convention here, every single one, and he just walks around, does the laugh, he just, and he is like the most lovely guy you'll ever meet. Like he'll just like, you can just go and chat with him. Like you don't even have to go up to his table. Like he's just such a genuine dude. He's always at every convention. Like it's like, oh, John Jarrett's going to be there, and everyone's like, oh, cool. I've already met him like a dozen times, but you know what? He's such a lovely guy, and and he's one of those killers in a movie though, where it's not paranormal or nothing. He's just a crazy, creepy dude, like, and he's
typecast.
Yeah.
Yes.
I actually just watched that the other day, and I know exactly what you're talking about now. I was like, because somebody recommended that. I was like, oh, I wonder if Bjorn saw that. That's an Aussie horror film. I was like, so I'm sure he has.
It's so
but yeah, that actor, like I swear I've seen him in other stuff, but he does, even on film, like when he's like playing the friend, it's like, okay. I was like, I could totally hang with that guy until he flips that switch, and you're like, yeah, never mind.
Guys, the outback here, man. You can't trust the Aussies out in the outback. Sorry. And he's just like, and it was based honestly the real story, it was based on the true story. Ivan Milat or whatever his name was. So yeah, no, he's a lovely guy, and yeah, I mean, it's just, he knows his craft really well, and yeah, I've met him a few times now. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So for not just this episode, but the Haunted Mask episode, were there ever any like super fun experiences that you had on set, or even like, any scary experiences that you can remember?
Oh, man. Okay. Well, I mean, outside of the fact that we had to film in the out wearing our wetsuits, I would say just in general, working on the set in Casa Loma was such an amazing experience because we got back access to everything. Like most tourists would come in, they'll see the castle, it's beautiful. But because we were there for so long, we actually were granted a ton of access to see all of this stuff behind the scenes that no one gets to see. So that alone was like a really very, very cool experience. I think like, yeah, for that whole thing, that was the main thing for me. It was just the set location. That was very, very cool.
Mm-hmm. I completely understand. It was a really cool location, as we already discussed.
Have you been back since filming?
I haven't. So I live in Toronto. So I mean, like, I might drive by it every once in a while, but I'm not gonna. I haven't stopped to go in. Maybe I'll take my son there one day. He might like that.
Just be like, I've been here.
Seen the episode. Maybe that'd be pretty cool to be like, you remember this?
Mom? Sue? I don't know who you are. Yeah.
I'm the princess.
Especially when you're actually there at the location, they might be like, oh.
Yeah, it's like, I'm the princess of the castle.
Like,
they should have a Goosebumps museum in Casa Loma. Somebody started moving on that.
They should. I agree.
At least a big poster up or something like of the, like Night Terror Tower.
Just my face.
But, just your face.
Just me.
This exact one, because you have the castle in the background.
And it just says, I was here.
Photoshop him out.
That's funny.
What was your favorite scene in Terror Tower, the episode? Not even like filming wise, just in general. Like, what was your personal favorite scene?
Favorite scene post-production when I saw the show?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I do have a personal favorite. It's right after the kitchen scene. So when my brother gets taken away with the scary guy, I'm in this like dungeon room by myself for like a hot minute. Like it's not very long. It's a very quick scene. And I just remember filming that one particular scene and understanding how that feeling would feel if I was left alone. And I just remember when I was seeing that, it came through on camera, and I just remembered that whole thing. And that was my favorite scene. It was just that one particular scene because it was like, it just felt so real. There's tons of other scenes that I could name off, but that was one in particular that I was like very focused in on and wanted to hyper relate like that feeling at that time.
Mm-hmm.
There was other ones I can name too if you want to go down that path, but yeah, that one in particular.
It was very ominous.
Post-production.
Very ominous scene.
Yeah.
Just like,
because I'm left alone. I'm left alone without my brother. That's the first time that you see me without him.
Mm-hmm.
So it brings it to be like a super vulnerable, I'm in a vulnerable state at this point, because there is a juncture in the story where it switches and then I'm by myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's a vulnerability, I think, that switches. And that's why I think I like that scene so much, is because now I'm by myself. I'm not with my brother anymore. I have to carry the story by myself. I am also very like scared, alone, all of those things. So yeah, I think there was a turning point there in the story that made it really interesting.
And not only that, but you're in a different location. Like you don't know where you are. At first, she's like thinking it's like a theme park, but everybody is like staring at her, like just like in disbelief. And then she approaches the one woman. And she's just like, it's too late for the boys. Like,
it's too late for you.
I smell evil all around
you. Yeah, that one.
And then people are coming up and like pointing to her, like she's the one, like she's the one.
Yeah, and you know what? That really was a part of the story that completely shifted at that point, because we're going back in time now, right? That's the official part where things are different. The story has changed. We're in a different era.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, no, it was, my husband was actually listening to a story from the kitchen as I was watching it today. And he was like, I totally forgot how many plot twists there are in this one particular episode. Like, there's just so much going on.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to Goosebumps.
Right. I love the scene with the lady
around every corner.
Like, yes, I can't believe her. I gave her all my trust, and then she puts me in the basket and immediately gives away the truth. Like, who is this woman?
You even paid her.
You gave her
I even paid her, and then she gets paid by me. She gets paid by the other guy too. She gets paid twice.
So, agent.
Oh man!
He like flicks it to her. He was like,
"Yeah, just like."
Yeah, no biggie.
I will admit that he gave off such like cool badass energy. Like he was like very rarely ever like angered. He's just kind of like, I'm in control.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like even just thinking about that too, like the whole set, everybody on set, all the extras, everybody that was there, like it was not just an average day of like showing up to set where you just put on your sneakers and your socks and your outfit. Like people had to get into full outfits. Like we had to get in full period pieces, right? So I think that was another thing that I had somewhat overlooked when I was working on set at the time. But looking back at it now, I'm like, yeah, it was really cool. I got to wear a full heavy, and it was heavy, by the way, that dress that I put on at the end, it was very heavy. I kind of overlooked the fact that we had the opportunity to go back in time and wear all of these really cool period pieces. So yeah, definitely an interesting episode.
It is. Like we said, Goosebumps never really did time travel, and the TV show, the books did time travel all the time, but the TV show did it 2 times, and only one of them was like to a different era, like to the 1800s locations. No,
in England.
In England,
like Cuckoo Clock of Doom, like back obviously in time.
Then I go against the Lord High Executioner.
Lord High Executioner.
It's like, get inside now. It's like, excuse me, can you help me? And she's just like.
And guys, I wanted to mention too, like if we don't even get to this question at all, like one of the things that was so interesting about working on this set too that I completely forgot about until I watched it today, I was like, oh yeah, I worked with a ton of actors on set that were pretending to be wax figures. So all these people were like dressed up as like wax figures that were supposed to be as still as humanly possible. Like, do not move. They were real people. And if they were caught breathing, it was like, we have to retake.
Like when you were actually, like, even just in the scene where Eddie looks, like, were they literally
that
people
guy?
like doing that?
Yes.
They were actual people doing that?
That was a real person.
Wow.
Yes, it was a real person. Most of the things,
is just like,
they were all real people. And it was just like, don't breathe. Okay. Whatever you do, don't breathe. Because they need to look like, obviously, like they're wax.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. Like, wow. I mean, I know there was definitely there was
this guy doing that. You're like, that's a real dude there.
Blink,
a real human.
There was definitely some parts where they had to like blink, so that like did that statue just blink at me, or like did it just like turn its head? Is like that sort of thing. And then you have the statue of the executioner with the hood and the big axe. That was creepy to me as a kid. Just sort of like the hooded figure is just a creepy visual. So we gotta mention when you guys go back in time and you meet Morgred. And
yes,
Morgred, he's a wizard, and he's the one who sent Sue and Eddie back in time, but that's why they also can't remember, because the memory is incomplete. So, but then it's revealed that they are the prince and princess that were locked in the tower. And once the spell wears off, they're in, the prince and princess dress, and then they speak in British accents. And I wanted to ask, was it hard to put on a British accent?
So that was a part of the auditioning process. That was a prerequisite to being able to get the part. Honestly, that was like in the audition process, they were like, okay, so speak these lines, and now you have to speak in an English accent. And so I think just sifting through the actors and actresses, they already had to know that there was somebody that they could at least work with that was like, okay at doing it.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not like,
Yeah.
British English accents are weird.
It's tough.
Because surprisingly, it is a kind of a tough accent to pull off if you're not native to England.
Oh, for sure. And
so-
we didn't have a coach or anything that was going to help us through it. So we kind of had to work our way on our own. And obviously there's a ton of different dialects too, right? So it's not going to be like a Cockney accent.
Yeah.
It has to be very
elegant.
A royal. Yes.
Royal, like royal.
From a royal. Yeah.
Like the Queen almost. Like you had to like sort of, I would have just gone and like put on a bunch of interviews of like the Queen or something, like preparing for it and been like, I need to sound like this.
Looking back, I'm like, oh,
there's no YouTube, there's no online access to just go look this stuff up like this today. So it's like
you would have to go take out a VHS tape.
Let me go down to the video store. Yeah, I'm just gonna rent this British.
I also think like at the juncture or the area that I was in my life too, I was sort of like, yeah, I think I could pull this off. I didn't like, if it was me as an adult now, I would be 100% in there studying everything, making sure it was absolutely perfect. But I think when you're young too, you're just sort of like, oh, show up and do the best I can.
Yeah. Did you get to keep anything? This is one question we normally ask. Did you get to keep anything from the set? Like,
oh gosh, I think I did. One of the things that I still have that are at my parents' house are all three stacked scripts, like original scripts. And yeah, so I have like the three scripts. I think, I was in my early teen years. So I like took off typically like a silver ring would go around to like pin them all together because it's obviously not digital and it's all printed on an actual like book form.
Yeah.
I took off the little silver ring that goes around the 3-ring binder thing and I put like yarn with a bow. So I still have those at my parents' house right now. So I have all three scripts there still. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Did they give you like any like sort of like, wrap gift or anything? Did you give you, I know when we talked to Kai Eric Erickson for Welcome to Camp Nightmare, he said they gave him like a Goosebumps backpack. But
they probably did. And I don't know. It might be at my parents' house somewhere buried in a box with the scripts. But yeah, I think the scripts for me, and obviously, of course, a book that was signed by R.L. Stein. We got one of those too, right?
Harry Towel book, yeah.
I was actually going to ask. I totally forgot to ask this earlier, but so going into the show, you had said you read maybe a few here or there. But did they have you read the book before coming onto the episode, or was it just sort of at your own discretion?
It was at your own discretion. It was not, you absolutely have to. It was more or less like read the script first. And if you have time, read the book.
Mm-hmm. Oh. That's the thing. Yeah. If it went by the book, there probably would have been more running. But it's always interesting because, as we said, some of the people who acted in the show were familiar with Goosebumps and even read the book that they start in the episode for. But it's not always the case. But I was interested because it's like maybe it's for like research purposes. Yeah.
Oh, of course. And again, like I was saying, like if this was me today as an adult and I was going into, let's just say they were like, okay, we want to do another episode. We want you to film in it. Pipe dream. I would absolutely be reading all the books, doing all the research. Like as an adult now, I just have more of an understanding of an impact on things. And so I would prepare myself a little bit more. But when you're 14, 15 years old, you're sort of like, cool, this is such an awesome thing. I'm just going to walk in fearless and not necessarily do all of my due diligence, right?
Yeah. Understandable.
If they did approach you like now, Haunted Mask 3 or a Night in Terror Tower sequel or something, like, I mean, would you sign on? Like, if they did actually approach you?
Would they be nuts?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, they might take the Michael Keaton approach to this, you know? They might want to get nuts. I think so.
I feel like I'm also very rusty when it comes to my acting ability on set, right? Like, I don't know.
You never know. Maybe you never left.
Never know.
True.
Maybe.
I honestly thought back when they did the Goosebump movie, like in 2015, I was like, oh, I guarantee we're going to see like cameos from so many of the original cast, like even if it's just some kid running down the hallway or like a teacher or something.
Yeah, something, right?
That'd be interesting.
I could be a mom now. I could be a mom.
I don't think, from the original show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after all this time, it's been, decades, not to make you feel old. It's been decades since the episode aired on TV. And, you rewatched it earlier today. How do you feel about the episode? Even taking yourself out of the fact that, like, you were in it, like, how do you feel about it now, all these years later? Like, does it hold up for you?
It does. It does. Honestly, at the end of the day, it was pretty complex storyline. I think from all of the Goosebumps episodes that were out there, I think I like how complex this one in particular was, not only through like concept, but through like going back and forth through future time, going, into the past, all of those things. I think that's what I liked in particular about this one episode. But yeah, I think it holds up. I like it. I showed it to my son for the first time today, and he was like flabbergasted. So yeah. And I actually got a message from my husband's friend who has sons, and they were just like, we watched A Night in Terror Tower and Goosebumps and blah, 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 all those things. And there's kids today that are still extremely excited about it. So what I think that says about this episode or this series in general is that it does stand the test of time. Like, there are kids today that are still really enjoying this. So I think that has a lot to say about, the writing and the storylines and the character building and all of those things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
one of the most
totally
iconic episodes, like, in the series. Haunted Mask, Terror Tower, Night Living Dummy, Stay Out of the Basement, those ones. Most of the two-parters are the ones that are just, they hold up, like
they do. And I think, and maybe they do just because they have more of an opportunity to tell a story, whereas maybe the shorter films don't. So these ones can get a little more in depth where the other ones don't have the opportunity. So maybe that's why, but.
Like we say this all the time. Anytime R.L. Stine would introduce an episode, we're like, oh, we're in for a special treat one.
You're in for the scared.
Yeah.
No, and I mean, I got to give special props to R.L. Stine's acting in this particular episode, because at the end, he's supposed to, bless his heart.
Get me out of here. Get me
bless
out.
His heart. He's a very particular type of actor. So yeah, so he's like supposed to be scared. He's like, let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out of here. Let me out of here. Let me out of here.
Yeah.
To go, the tower is closing. But you know what? It's like, you wouldn't have it any other way how he delivered that. It was R.L. Stine. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's what makes it so endearing too, right? Is that is 100% quintessential his character. He wears all black. He comes in. He's not capable necessarily of showing a ton of emotions. That's him.
Yeah, totally.
He was basically a cast member in the show. He really was. You know what I mean? So,
and he was the one making all the stories that were being adapted. So he had that. He had his own royalty to him.
Oh yes, 100%.
Well, we got one more surprise before we end the night, and we mentioned this earlier, but there was a behind the scenes featurette for this episode, the only one of the entire series. Most of the Goosebumps behind the scenes stuff has been never publicized, lost to time. A lot of it has been surfaced because we talked with the people who worked on the show. But A Night in Terror Tower had a behind the scenes featurette, and we're going to watch it right now.
A sneak peek of an upcoming video in the Goosebumps series from 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment.
Hi, my name's Corey Sevier, and I'm going to be playing the role of Eddie
Corey.
in a Goosebumps production, A Night in Terror Tower. And I'm just here to take you behind the scenes. Come on. The show we're making is based on the book by R.L. Stine, A Night in Terror Tower. And what it's about is basically just me and my sister are going to London for a vacation. And when we get to this place with all the other tour people, slowly but surely, weird things start to happen.
We're working very hard in this story today to give a wonderful visual look. It will be interesting to watch because we have a marvelous castle. We have medieval soldiers.
Well, this is the torture chamber. They used to bring people up here, and what can I say? They used to torture them.
Torture? Did you say torture?
When I first come into the torture chamber, I'm just mesmerized. Like, wow, this is really cool. And then when we're looking at the wax figures, everybody else is looking and they see them as just wax figures. But we start to see them as the real people.
Come on.
I want to take a look at this staircase here. I had to run up and down as fast as my legs could go up this thing because I'm running away from a monster up here.
Yeah.
And believe me, this guy's going to look pretty scary. He's huge. In real life, he's 9'5". Oh, sorry, 9'5". 6'5". Sorry.
Hey!
It's really fun to work with Katie because I have a little brother and he's younger, and I get to play the younger brother for a change. Just throughout the story, I'm sort of leaning on her because when we get scared, she's more of the strong one because she's the older one. We look a lot alike. Lots of people, if you saw us on the street, we look like brother and sister. Well, I'll tell you one thing, you never do it in order. You do the last scene, you do the middle scene, and it's a lot of work.
Roll them, please. Action. Once more.
I brought my children at one point to the set, and the most exciting thing about the production to them was the craft services table, all the sweets and food.
Oh yeah, that's great. Great. They always have really good food here.
Chicken, salad, potatoes, everything I need.
The food is unbelievable. The desserts, they have really good desserts. My mom likes the desserts. Sometimes you kind of get into the character, and yeah, sometimes you get scared yourself, and like when you're breathing hard, you know, you just like you find yourself breathing right after he says cut, and you're like, he said cut, it's over, you know. Actually, I think when I first saw the script, it was a great script, and I think it's going to be a very good show. It's like a show I would want to watch. Well, that's it for our look behind the scenes at A Night in Terror Tower. Hope you like the show. See you later. Bye.
Oh my gosh. So sweet.
Blast from the past.
Yeah. Guys, that was great. Thank you so much for having me. This was really wonderful.
Absolutely. We're very glad to have you and, talk Goosebumps with you. And we're very glad that we were able to unlock that part of your life again. So thank you for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure on our end.
What can I say? It's going to be Halloween soon,
I don't know.
So I hope that you guys are ready for Halloween, because I know that around our house where my son is crazy about Halloween. So
yeah, we're ready. And funny enough, that is actually going to be starting for us next week here on the Goosebumps Crew podcast. So you guys are going to want to tune in. We got some awesome plans for Halloween. In fact, we'll be saying goodbye for today, Kathryn, but it won't be too much longer before you join us again. So we'll keep you guys in the loop on what that's going to be. But for now, that is going to do it for tonight's episode of the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. Once again, Kathryn Short, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure. Happy to have you.
My pleasure.
And we'll be happy to have you back on some other time. Make sure you go follow Bjorn and Nick at Goosebumps Aussie Fan and Sean, respectively, on their social medias and their YouTubes. Make sure, if you like today's episode, make sure you leave a like and a comment. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe. Follow us on our audio platforms and social medias. All those links are going to be in the description below, so check them out. Halloween is starting next week, and we got some awesome plans for Goosetober. That's right, Goosetober on the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, so make sure you tune in. But until then, this has been the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, and from all of us here, we as always want to wish you all to take care, stay safe, and have a very scary day.